Bones and Bobbins podcast is now on Patreon. Would you like to access to bonus episodes, digital extras, exclusive merch, and more? Then join us in the Curiosity Shop at patreon.com/Bones and Bobbins.
Your generous support helps make the show happen and will also earn you our very eternal gratitude and entry into our private Patreon-only Facebook group, which got a little Ed Gein-tastic.
It did.
This week, so...
Also, though, it got some witch bottle love from an actual...
I forgot about that, and we need to ask her if we can share it with the rest of you guys, because one of our patrons has in her possession an actual intact witch bottle.
Yes. From, like, did you say 1918 or something like that? It's old.
It's after 1860 because of the nails, but I can't remember when she said. It's before 1920.
It's cool, no matter when it's from.
Yeah, maybe 1906? I can't remember. Anyway, I'm sure she's listening to this and being like, oh my God, can't you just look? And yes, I can, but I also really want to talk about it a lot. So I'm going to ask you for permission first. In a dusty old shop on a forgotten old street, you'll find two witches with books 3 boxes deep. Next to rusty old needles and faded red thread, you'll come in for yarn, but leave with pigments instead. Whether poisons or patterns, we're always discreet, where creepy and crafty and morbidity meet. Welcome to the Bones and Bobbins podcast. Hello, morbid makers. We are your slightly creepy,
Mildly disconcerting,
somewhat sinister,
delightfully discomposed,
opaquely odd,
merely morbid,
marvelously misanthropic hosts.
And this is Bones and Bobbins, Season 1, Episode 11, Knit 1, Spy 2.
Goodness. I'm Haley from Red Handled Scissors and the Very Serious Crafts podcast.
I'm Natalie from Uberdork Designs, an official Murderino maker.
Fancy.
Fun.
All right.
Indeed. So how you doing? What's up? What's
I
happening?
don't remember.
That is, if that's not a 2020 response, I don't know what is.
There is an answer. I know there is. There's a pile of shit behind me, so I must be up to something.
Up to something. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. Always. Always.
Yes, me too. Yeah, I really have no idea. I'm sure I will think of something at some point, but not now. How are you?
I'm good. I've got our Bones and Bobbins official stickers already in envelopes. I had to order note cards because I realized when I went to ship them that I had nothing to put them in.
Yes, and they're fancy rainbow.
Aren't they fun? I was super excited. So they are set and stamped and ready to go out to our patrons, who I appreciate and adore very much. It's Murderino Maker Giving Week this week, which is, if you're not aware, listeners, of what Murderino Makers are, Murderino.
I don't know what it is either.
I'm guessing you know Murderino is a fan of My Favorite Murder. The official Murderino Makers is a group of makers that have kind of bonded together and have been around for quite some time now, but we vow to give 15% of all of our profits during Giving Week to that month's charity. And the charities tend to be like Ending the Backlog, focusing on Indigenous rights. We made sure that we were backing Black Lives Matter. So it's socially conscious, and prior to revolution and pandemic, we focused a lot on, again, ending the backlog and victims' rights and domestic abuse and things like that. So, which is really fun. It's a fun way for us to give back and to basically try to make things better. So that
Nice.
So that is the Murder Reno Makers, and it's Giving Week this week. So, which is fun, but it's also I'm in the middle of trying to get all of my things from. I had a Facebook page, or not a Facebook page. I have a Facebook page at an Etsy store for quite some time, like I don't know, like over 6,500 sales, and decided to switch from Etsy to my own shop. So I'm in the middle of trying to build my own shop and launch that on my site. So that's what I'm up to. I got a bunch of supplies in so I can start cranking out some new designs, and I'm finishing up the Frances Glessner Lee patron saint sticker for Bones and Bobbins that I'm working on.
Which we've now had a million ideas for.
Right. I just have to print and cut the kitten corsets. That design is done. So yeah.
I am so excited about kitten corsets.
I really like the kitten corset sticker. Like I like it makes me feel good to be designing again, and I like stickers. It's fun to make them now, so.
That just made me remember that wasn't like, I want to say 1950s slang for boobs, sweater puppies.
I think so. Like, that sounds very Grease-like era familiar.
Yeah. Well, I have a slang dictionary from, well, I think slightly earlier than that, which I get some of my favorite phrases from. But, I don't know.
Have you watched Schitt's Creek at all?
No.
So there's a character on there played by Catherine O'Hara, who's a brilliant actress, named Mara. And she has an accent and a dialect completely all of her own. And so Daniel Levy, who is one of the creators of it, Eugene Levy's son, gifted her this book. And I have it somewhere, and I can't remember the title of it. And I keep trying to find it. But it is just a book full of these obscure and amazing words that make me so happy. And she uses just so many crazy words in her dialogues. I like words. Words are fun. But it's a lot of words that are antiquated and were once probably popular, but now have fallen out of style decades ago. So it's fun.
Maybe we have similar book collections.
Yes.
I always thought that if I were going to start a fashion blog, which is never going to happen, that I would call it Cat Sticks, because that used to be slang for women's legs.
Nice. And,
yeah.
Like, is that where the slang pussy came from then?
I'm guessing that cat sticks came from pussy as opposed to the other way around.
Interesting.
I'm not really sure. I don't actually know the etymology of that. I'm sure we could take a really deep dive. Maybe that's what I'll do for next week. So would you ask me what I've been up to?
What you been up to? Learning about pussy?
Yeah, which was a word that I had never said out loud until the hats.
Ah, yeah.
And I'm still deeply uncomfortable about it.
Oh, my.
Which is funny because I am maybe the least prudish person in the world. And it's not that I find it to be vulgar. It's just that's not the word for it.
Right. And it's also just weird.
Those have real labels.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and we can talk about them.
Right.
We can talk about them for all time.
Yes.
But, yeah. Anyway.
I get it.
I feel like you're getting a real straight shot into my Aspie brain. That is what I've been doing this week. I have been trying to solve Aspie problems that no one else understands are problems.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And doing tech support on a friend's website because I like to find the thing that's wrong in the sea of things that could possibly be wrong.
Yes, I like, and this goes right along with the episode. I really like coding makes me happy.
Me too.
Because it makes sense. And
so organized.
Right, it's organized. You can usually find the problem. When you find the problem, just fix it. There's just something about coding that I've always just really enjoyed.
Give me your variables, your orders of operation.
I get
Yearning to run free?
Run free in an orderly fashion.
Oh, wasn't it breathe free?
That too.
I can see the Statue of Liberty from my apartment. You would think, and by from my apartment, I mean I would have to go on the roof. But
still,
like, that shit's right there.
Yeah.
You would think I would know. Anyway.
You know what else is right there?
A fire truck.
And our Curiosity Shop members over on Patreon. And normally, right now, we'd give a totally normal and not all creepy welcome to new members. This is the first episode we don't have a new member, but we have 2 members that upped their level this week. So
because they're amazing. And we
amazing.
love them.
Absolutely. So huge shout out and thank you to Elaine and Heather. You are the bestest.
Absolutely. And I think we would actually go beyond exploring hidden graveyards in the woods with you. I think we
Absolutely.
would maybe step foot into that real dark cave.
Absolutely.
That nobody should go into.
Definitely.
That one.
I'll even go first. As long as I have like a flashlight and my knitting needles. 'Cause, weapon and light.
I will bring witchcraft.
There you go.
Or my, well, I just have big dick energy.
There.
Broadly. For someone who is a mini human, my dick is massive. It like has its own zip code.
I dig that about you.
Yeah. So I don't need to go in armed. But I do want a light source.
Light source is always good.
Although that said, whenever I'm knitting with double-pointed needles, if I happen to be watching Buffy, I always pocket them and don't even notice that I have pocketed them. Because, I mean, second nature to grab a weapon.
I have a set of giant, I don't even remember what gauge they are at this point, needles that are called my Mr. Pointies. When the girls would draw me as a superhero when they were little, my knitting needles were my weapon.
That's funny. On my other podcast, the Very Serious Crafts podcast,
Which is delightful.
one of my co-hosts' little brothers drew all of us as superheroes.
That's amazing.
And it was really clear that he actually listens to the podcast.
Aww.
And we all had our various weapons based on things that we had talked about in the show.
That's amazing.
It just made me think of
amazing.
that. Yeah. And he put a witch hat on me, which I thought was adorable.
That is adorable.
Yes. Like, attention to detail. I appreciate that.
Yes.
So, speaking of, like, exploring things.
And gangs of armed chicks.
I mean, armed with knowledge.
Yeah. Knowledge is power, man.
Probably also knives and axes.
Yes.
Sometimes. Flints. Anyway. I want to tell you about Girl Guide Spies.
Yay! I'm excited.
So, if you are an American listener, you probably know the Girl Guides as Girl Scouts. So, that's who we're talking about here. So, the story of the Girl Guides actually starts with the Boy Scouts. Because I guess it never occurred to anyone that girls, too, might like to be scouts.
'Cause patriarchy.
And so, in 1908, a British, Lieutenant General, I remembered, Robert Baden-Powell, wrote a book called Scouting for Boys, a handbook for instruction in good citizenship. It was published because the Lieutenant General had noticed that young boys liked making themselves useful during wartime activities. Okay. I should note that said activities were taking place in South Africa at that time.
No.
Because colonialism.
Fucking colonialism.
Yeah, well, there's a dark side to literally everything.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or a very, very white side, as the case may be.
A deeply, deeply unpleasantly white side. A very, very bright side, perhaps. Wait, no. Anyway, colonialism. No. Okay. So, the book that he wrote covered things like tracking and signaling and cooking. And he also took a big group of boys out on a camping trip that I guess was sort of the inspiration for then writing this instructional manual.
Okay.
And so, the thing is, girls bought the book too. And they also started calling themselves scouts.
Nice.
And for a while in that first year, there were scout troops, some of which were only girls, calling themselves Girl Scouts. And there were some co-ed groups that were forming.
Nice.
Which, of course, because of the patriarchy, that went about as well as you would expect.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that the Girl Guides as an organization was conceived because of this quote from the Boy Scouts Headquarters Gazette in 1909.
Ooh.
But I'm going to guess that it didn't help. So, quote, "If a girl is not allowed to run or even hurry, to swim, ride a bike, or raise her arms above her head, how can she become a scout?"
Oh.
Now I have several questions.
Oh.
Including, why can't I raise my arms above my head?
Right.
That seems like just reaching for things. Is it because I might show an ankle? Like, aren't we a little late for that being the risque thing? I thought that was more Regency.
There's a lot of curse words flowing through my head right now.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, Girl Scouts were still registered at Boy Scouts headquarters.
Ha.
Because they existed. All right. And so that wouldn't do because propriety. So Baden-Powell decided that the Boy Scouts should, in fact, be boys, and asked his sister, Agnes Baden-Powell, or Baden-Powell, I'm unclear, perhaps Baden. That sounds probably more correct. Agnes Baden-Powell, to form the Girl Guides. And the first company, which seems to align with the American idea of troop, that Miss Baden-Powell registered still exists.
That's awesome.
Which I think is kind of cool.
I also kind of hope that Agnes punched her brother in the nuts.
Oh, Agnes, I feel like Agnes maybe got a little of her own by preparing girls and young women to pick up the slack when the boys went off to war.
Nice.
And I'm not sure very much about her ideology, but I do know that she did start the Girl Guides and that she called them guides for an interesting reason that I think is pretty telling. Also, we're gonna cringe here for a moment. Okay, so the Girl Guides were named after a regiment in the British Indian Army. There's where we cringe.
Yep.
Called the Corps of Guides, which was known for its skills in tracking and survival.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it was named for a group with those skills. Not, I don't know, swimming and jumping and biking.
And raising of the arms.
Well, I mean, camping. Mostly camping. Maybe they were talking about raising arms like raising guns, not raising physical arms. I don't think so, though.
I don't know. That makes more sense than not being able to like raise your physical arms.
Officially, the Girl Guides were formed in 1910. So they were still very new when the Great War, also known as World War I, broke out in 1914. And in August of 1914, a letter from Miss Baden-Powell encouraged these newly minted Girl Guides to work for badges that would be useful during the war effort, especially first aid, cooking, nursing, knitting, and gardening, which you may think of as traditionally feminine skills, which they are, but they were also the skills that kept both soldiers and people at home alive.
Right, they're important.
Yeah, and they could also, if they wanted, go cheer up families who had parted with a father or son.
Oh.
And I'm not sure if parted means died or parted means they were just off to war. Okay. I'm a little unclear because I'm direct and that is not.
Yes.
But one of my favorite things that the Girl Guides did during the war effort in World War I was they were tasked with collecting a number of medicinal herbs like foxglove for digitalis, broom, and hemlock.
They were green witches.
So, what's that?
They were green witches.
And they could kill you. Yes. Digitalis, man. That ain't nothing to fuck with. I mean, I guess unless your heart is failing. And then you fuck with it in very small controlled amounts, because otherwise it will do the opposite. Anyway, so, while that was going on mostly in the UK, Girl Guides in Canada worked in munitions factories, made surgical dressings and bandages, knitted socks, distributed informational leaflets, sewed soldiers' clothing in factories, and prepared khaki fabrics. And I'm not really sure what preparing khaki fabrics would be. I'm guessing either cutting out the patterns.
Yeah.
Or dyeing them, perhaps, that kind of processing. So, meanwhile in Canada, that's what was going on.
Gotcha.
And the Girl Guides broadly, and this would extend into also World War II, which will come up again and again, because the Girl Guides were consistently part of the war effort. They hand embroidered their own badges, and the skill on the badges that they made for their uniforms is just astounding. I found a really neat group of photographs from the Girl Guides Canada website that showed the 1940s era uniform with the hand-sewn patches, and instead of pins, they had tin buttons to show membership because of metal shortages. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to look, and I find this about pretty much all textiles. You can tell a lot about history and what was going on at the time from looking at the textiles of an era, and these uniforms really tell a story.
Yeah.
Also, something kind of neat, and before we get into the spooky spying, is that in World War II, Guide International Service was formed, which consisted of adult Girl Guides who were sent in teams to Europe following World War II to help with relief work.
That's cool.
Which I think is really neat.
Yeah.
And also, like, caring for war orphans. And, like, there were a lot of things that, frankly, men weren't prepared to deal with.
Yeah.
That women were at the time. And maybe even now.
Yeah. Right.
As I roll my eyes. But I thought that was kind of neat. That the bond of being a Girl Guide was so strong that it would extend into adulthood. And while we now, and I say we, some of us may have grown up thinking that Girl Scouts or Girl Guides, depending on where you were, or 4-H or whatever it was, where you grew up. Not that 4-H is the same thing, but not dissimilar. They were sort of out of fashion, at least in my childhood. I really love the idea that these adult women were still so connected to that idea of service that they formed this group to go help with work that needed doing. So, now I want to tell you about that time the Girl Guides worked with MI5.
Yay!
Yes, that MI5.
Yes.
Like the James Bond MI5.
So excited.
Or isn't he MI6?
I don't know. 5, 6, whatever.
Whatever am I? Gosh, I should really know that. Hold on. I need to find out before I embarrass myself. It is, yes, MI6. I was correct.
Yes.
Thank goodness. Okay, so in the First World War, about 90 teenage girls between age 14 and 16 worked for security service MI5 in World War I. Wait, I said that already. They're all still in World War I. Yes. So these girls, aged 14 to 16, like I said, earned 50 pence per week as messengers to distribute highly classified information for the war effort.
Okay, that's my kid's age, and that doesn't seem like a lot, but then again, back then, that probably was a lot. I don't know if it's risking your life a lot, but it's badass no matter what.
It is risking your life a lot. And as the war wore on, these girls became so trusted that some of the messages they were delivering were allowed to be delivered verbally
Oh, wow.
So they wouldn't have the actual information on them.
Oh, wow.
So they were being trusted with war secrets and delivering those secrets safely to where they needed to go. So they were actually really, really involved in the real world consequences of the war effort.
Right. I mean, they're essentially agents at that point.
Yes. And, I mean, they were. So, this is my favorite little tidbit about this. And I'm very, very excited to tell you. You may be wondering, why? Why the Girl Guides were the ones who did these obviously dangerous missions? Well, apparently at the start of the war, that task had been given to the Boy Scouts. But very, very quickly after, the Girl Guides were deemed to be more efficient because they were less boisterous and talkative.
Suck on that, Boy Scouts!
All I'm saying is the Boy Scouts were too chatty and too loose-lipped to be trusted with war secrets.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's my favorite.
I like that.
Yeah. The role of the girls was uncovered when Girl Guiding UK and MI5 researched their histories as part of their centenary celebrations. MI5, which was founded in 1909, tracked down a secret document called Duties of H Branch, which specifically covered the roles of the Girl Guides. And I got this quote from the site Scotland's War.
Okay.
Because I could not find, even on MI5's website, the primary source document.
It's classified.
Well, it was unclassified. That's the whole point of them even talking about it. Anyway, Section H6 adds, quote, "A messenger should be between the ages of 14 and 16, a guide of good standing, quick, cheerful, and willing. Guides are engaged on 3 months probation. The initial rate of pay is 10 shillings a week, 50 pence, with dinner and tea included.
Okay.
Guides who do special work or have special responsibilities receive a higher rate of pay. Those who help in the kitchen receive 4 shillings and 6 pence extra duty pay per month. The guides are paid weekly by the captain on Friday morning. The hours of work are from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on alternate weeks. 50 minutes are allowed them for dinner and 20 minutes for tea. Girl Guides are on duty on alternate Sundays, and they get 1 half-day off duty each week. A week's holiday is given in the summer and short leave at Christmas and Easter. When a guide falls sick, a doctor's certificate must be sent within 48 hours of the illness. Otherwise, pay is stopped." So these were actually enlisted girls.
Seriously, yeah.
And so the document also explains the duties of the guides, which are, quote, "The guides are responsible for dusting all rooms on their floors between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., cleaning and filling the ink pots and disinfecting the telephones, as well as answering any bells which may ring between those hours. After 10 a.m., their work consists chiefly of collections for the dispatch room, for posts and for running messages, sorting cards, collecting files, collecting waste paper, and rolling it up ready for burning." And this has been confirmed by MI5 since 2009. in recognition of a century of girl guiding. So this isn't just rumor, it really happened. And
so awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, I was thinking about why you would pick girls from 14 to 16. And my guess is because those girls can be invisible.
Yep.
Because they either look like children, or they look like teenagers, but they don't look like women.
Right.
And it would be really... You wouldn't expect girls of that age to be entrusted with anything of severe importance. And so I just think that's fascinating. I would love to hear more about the reasoning behind why they chose that age range and what those girls actually thought about what they were doing, because there isn't much information on that available.
I mean, women are easily dismissed to begin with.
Especially
but then
teenage girls.
Right. So they're, teenage girls and very young girls, they're just, they're flibberty gibbets. There's nothing, they're just flighty little things that couldn't possibly be of importance.
They also picked that age because they wouldn't necessarily be targets for sexual assault.
One would hope.
I'm just thinking of how old 14 to 16-year-olds really look as opposed to how old they think they look at the time.
Right.
And they look like kids.
Definitely.
I mean, some of them, a few of them really do not. Like, to their, unfortunately, negative targeting often. Right. But, I wonder, I mean, that must have, because they were being sent into areas that were largely men and nurses, I would think. Anyway, I just think that's interesting.
And if caught, they're children. You know what I mean? Like, it's not...
And, I mean, hopefully that would be taken into account. I don't know.
Sure, wars
what the rules of engagement were at that time.
Oh, well, especially during World War I. During World War II.
Right, World War II, I know.
All bets were off.
Well, I mean, there were also, technically, I believe, rules of engagement at World War II. Like, it was known that if you surrendered to U.S. troops, you wouldn't be tortured. Like, that was a thing.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore. But, like, that used to be one of the points of pride of the U.S. military.
Right.
That people would surrender to them because they knew they wouldn't be treated poorly.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so, Girl Guides, man. They're fucking badass.
Seriously. That is incredibly badass.
Yeah. And there's a lot more information on, like, what they did, and I found a little bit of information on specifically their activities in World War II, though I couldn't find specific spying being done then, but that also might be too soon to be declassified.
Yes. Also, it would indicate they were incredibly good at their job.
Oh, yes. And heaven forbid women be incredibly good at their job. Although there were many women agents.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily... Well, on certain sides, there were many known. And especially propaganda spreaders. But...
Yes.
There is an entire book called How the Girl Guides Won the War.
Ooh.
About thousands of them taking their Girl Guide vows, which are pretty much exactly what you think of as Scout vows now.
I used to have it
who would-
memorized because I was a troop leader.
Who were you?
I was. I actually started my oldest, her troop in kindergarten. I was troop leader. Yep.
Interesting. I was a Cub Scout.
Nice.
Before that was a problem.
Oh, everything's a problem to them because they're mostly run by the Mormon Church. But that's a whole nother episode.
Wow. So they may or may not have been spies, but thousands of them took their vows literally during the Second World War and risked their lives in the name of the war effort, rescuing children from the Warsaw Ghetto.
Oh, wow.
Apparently working for MI5, though that hasn't been confirmed specifically that I can find, or feeding prisoners in Auschwitz.
Wow.
Which is quite something. So they were extremely important to very real work. It was illegal to be a guide under the Nazis.
Wow.
So they went underground and they rescued Jewish children from extermination.
That's fucking amazing. Like,
yeah,
just,
and
I love it.
yeah, so, and these were presumably, there are branches of the Girl Guides or Girl Scouts worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And so these were presumably Girl Guides who were in either Germany or occupied territories. And they worked in children's homes as nurses, provided bandages made from old women. Not okay. We're not going Ed Gein on this one. Old linen.
Makes a little more sense.
Yeah. They gave out food and drink, and they organized, or one group organized over 15 auxiliary hospitals and refugee shelters.
Wow.
And centers for lost children. They organized escapes from prison camps and hospitals and hid prisoners. They ran a kitchen that fed up to 600 children a day, and they also fed prisoners and penetrated enemy lines to feed soldiers. Wow. Others were stationed on Warsaw roofs, shoveling off incendiary bombs.
Nice.
Like consider.
Like, that's actual combat.
Live ammunition. And while their fellow guides stood in the streets ready to extinguish them with sand.
Amazing.
And
That's some trust right there, too. I'm just saying.
right? They helped British soldiers to escape a prisoner of war camp, only to be caught at the Yugoslavian border, apparently. Like, they're just all of these stories about how these girls, and let's be clear, these are children.
Yeah.
They aren't adult women.
No.
They were taking the whole be prepared mentality, which is the Girl Guide motto. I know it's the Boy Scout motto too, right? Mm-hmm. Is it also the Girl Scout motto?
No.
Motto? I promise to
on my honor, I will try to serve my country and mankind and live by the Girl Scout law. I'm missing a chunk of it in there.
God.
You're
missing God.
I skipped over God, sorry.
It happens. So some of them were arrested by the Gestapo. Some of them printed and edited and distributed local underground newspapers, which contained information that they gleaned from their own covert radio monitoring.
My gosh.
3 of them died at Auschwitz.
Oh, no.
Although the UK guides were lucky enough to not be living under occupation, they really did prepare very, very thoroughly. And when the British government, according to the author of this book, was only interested in winning the war and didn't have time to think about the aftermath, the Girl Guide stepped into the breach, and the Guide Emergency Committee started meeting from 1942 alongside the Red Cross, Quakers, and Salvation Army, preparing for peacetime.
Yeah.
And they also went under a period of intensive training to become volunteers for international service. And again, I just want to point out that these are children.
Babies.
Yes. And it wasn't just the Girl Guides. The Brownies were involved too.
Oh, they're even babyer.
These are children.
Right.
Although, as far as I can tell, they were involved largely in fundraising and helping behind the scenes.
Still, though, I mean, that's still responsibility. You know?
Yeah. I can't even imagine. So there's an entire section of this book also devoted to the Brownies, and how they basically made a huge quantity of knitted items to send out, and how they all dealt with, like, outbreaks of typhus and dealing with gravely sick children. And
Brownies are like 9 and 10 years old.
Yeah. Even younger, right?
Well, it starts out as a daisy. So kindergarten and first grade is daisy. And then second and third grade, I believe, are brownies. And then there's Girl Scouts, and then I can't remember what comes after Scout.
Like
the teenagers.
Not Eagle, but whatever.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're talking about 9 and 10 years old.
Yeah. That is just a little taste of what the Girl Guides and the Brownies were up to during the Second World War, when they probably were also spying and sending covert messages, although we cannot specifically, at least I cannot specifically, confirm that with a primary source. But if you want to know more, you should absolutely read How the Girl Guides Won the War, which was written by Janie Hampton. So, that is how badass the Girl Guides / Girl Scouts actually are. And were.
Is amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
And I was so cussing excited for this episode, because I am also going to talk about some badass ladies during wartime.
You are.
And at the end of this episode, I think everyone listening will wonder how the patriarchy is still a thing, or is a thing, because seriously.
Yeah, I would just like to say that the guides did the knitting and the sewing and the cooking and created their own badges and also made their own uniforms and made the uniforms for the men. And, also made the bandages and did the nursing and, I don't know, picked the herbs that made the medicines. Like,
they did it all. Like, seriously.
Crafty bitches, man. Do not fuck with us.
Exactly.
If you can make with your hands, you are a dangerous, useful weapon.
Yes.
And don't ever forget it.
Damn, Skippy. So today I'm going to talk about the art of espionage through knitting.
Ooh. Yes!
And I'm going to cover two facets of this and some badass ladies that we are going to for sure be adding to our patron saint collection.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm going to start with the why. Like, why knitting? Well, knitting has long been wildly popular out of necessity and just the tradition of handicrafts. During wartime especially, though, men, women, children, basically everyone was recruited to knit for the troops.
Yeah, if you weren't at war, you were knitting.
Right. Especially my arch nemesis, socks. So
I love knitting socks.
They scare me. So
I don't even wear hand knit socks, and I love making them.
Well, I'll delve deeper into that bit during our next curiosity dispatch.
Okay.
But with the popularity, it was a harmless task that so many partook in. So women, especially, were seen knitting all over the place. They could pretty much blend in anywhere. A lady knitting in pub, totally commonplace. It was a perfect disguise to eavesdrop. So that's part of the why knitting. The second is, so like in addition to designing things, I also like to code things. Fun random Natalie fact. I wrote my first animated computer art when I was in 3rd grade. And in 5th grade, I taught all of the faculty at our school district an adult Apple Basic class. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Someday we need to discuss how I, in Basic, programmed my Tandy OS 9 to turn on and start typing during a slumber party.
Yes, we do. So I love coding. And knitting, it's binary. It's essentially just 2 stitches, knit and purl. And if you look at any pattern, it kind of looks like a page of code. The binary...
Because it is a page of code.
Right. The binary nature of it makes it perfect to adapt into any code, especially Morse code, and actually to uniquely make up their own ones. So the purl stitch...
And punch cards.
Yeah. So if you don't know, the purl stitch makes... a stitch that looks like a horizontal line or a small bump, and the knit stitch is smooth and looks like a low V. So by using a single purl stitch and then like 3 in alternating row together, one can actually transmit in Morse code of a dot and a dash. So, and then other knitters, they tied small knots into the yarn, with each knot's placement denoting a unique code. So like one of the ones I read about was like they could hold this knitted object up to a sheet of paper or a spot on a wall that had the alphabet out, and then where it hit was a different letter.
Man, you had to have some amazing tension control.
Seriously. So you add that commonplace, easy to blend, plus the ability to friggin' code, and it's pretty perfect. In terms of...
That's because women are amazing and why we went to the moon.
Exactly.
Because a woman programmed that shit.
Exactly. So how do these badass ladies use that combination to make huge impact on wars, and which wars were they involved in?
Tell me.
We're going to take us back to the Revolutionary War in the U.S. So
holy shit.
Yeah. So as British troops took over the homes of colonials during war, people were like, well, they were less than pleased. And one such dissatisfied rebel was badass number 1, Molly, a.k.a. Mom, Rinker of Philadelphia. So
hell yes, Mom Rinker.
Right? So troops
don't fuck with Philly.
Seriously. Troops quartered themselves in her house. And they didn't allow any of the men of the household in the dining area because that's where they would meet and dine. But Molly, however, was allowed in to serve the troops. And it was here that she listened extremely closely to all the little conversations they had as she floated about undetected, filling their mugs, taking their plates.
What?
And
Did they think she didn't think?
Well, of course not. She's a woman. We don't have brains. So she would then write all the information down that she heard on a small piece of paper, wrap it around a stone, and then wrap her yarn around the stone until it formed like a normal looking ball of yarn. She would then take her knitting and her little yarn ball to a rock that overlooked some woods, and she would sit there and knit. And then at exact time that she needed to, she would drop that ball of yarn off the rock into the woods below without being noticed, and one of George Washington's men would ride by and grab the yarn to learn the British military secrets. So fuck yeah,
Wow.
Molly Momrinker. So that's like the and now again, it's not entirely like coded in knitting, but knitting is how it was distributed. Now, a lot of times when you hear, like, the first thing that came out of my daughter's mouth when I mentioned knitting espionage was Madame Defarge, who was an advocate for the French Revolution in A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens, which was written back in 1859,
Right.
when I mentioned knitting spies. So there are theories of the symbolism behind her character. They're actually kind of a fun deep dive, including that she represents one of the aspects of the fates, the Morai, the fates as represented in Greek mythology. They used yarn to measure out the life of a man and to cut it to end it. So Defarge knits, and her knitting secretly encodes the names of people to be killed. The fact that she just chilled by a fucking guillotine knitting away and no one thought anything of it is pretty much a perfect example of how knitters could blend in anywhere. And her badassery as a character is kind of debated by many. She's fictional, so I didn't include her. She is not number 2. Lady whose badassery is not debated and who is our badass number 2
Yes.
is Louise De Bitteny.
Well.
She is French. The woman who ran probably the largest spy network of the Great War. Louise was born in July of 1880 into an aristocratic family, but the family ended up suffering like a huge financial loss, which forced her to get a job, and that job was she was a governess and a tutor to the children of wealthy families, like in various European countries.
Oh no, genteel poverty!
Right?
They were house rich.
Because of this,
But money
though,
poor.
she ended up speaking English, German, and Italian fluently, and then to a lesser
Like you do.
right? And then to a lesser degree, Russian, Czech, and Spanish.
I mean, like everyone outside America does.
Right? So after the invasion of
Not
Lille,
those specifically, but...
Right. So after the invasion of Lille in October of 1914, she fled to Saint-Omer, where she helped care for the wounded. In February of 1915, she enrolled in the British Secret Intelligence Service under the pseudonym Alice Dubois. And she was soon joined by a woman who went by the alias Charlotte Lemeron. And from there, the Ellis Network was born. And it enlisted over 80 agents in the region of Lille alone. And an important logistics hub for the German army, because before it extended its operation into Cambrai, Valençay, and Saint Quentin. So the Ellis Network provided information about military emplacements.
I just got chills.
And airfields, and they monitored troop movements, they located gun batteries and munitions depots, and they helped Allied soldiers escape to Holland, which was a neutral country then. The network is estimated to have saved the lives of more than 1,000 British soldiers during the 9 months of full operation from January to September of 1915. Eventually caught and sent to Siegburg prison, she led a strike. So initially they were gonna kill her, but then she ended up talking her way down to just like lifelong labor. Then she led a fucking strike at having to assemble munition parts and refused to. Sadly, she ended up dying in 1918 from like a lung ulcer. But most attribute knitting as being the main way that they managed to complete their
Influenza?
task. Right. So using it to blend in and encode, even write code within patterns and then pass them on. So, fuck yeah.
Cool.
Also, there's a book called The Ellis Network, which I was excited about, but then I found out that it's a novel that's kind of loosely based on. But I'm going to try to find some more sources of actual fact to add in the notes. So that brings us to badass lady number 3, which is Phyllis Latour Doyle. And she might be my favorite. Phyllis was born in 1921 in South Africa to a French doctor and a British citizen. Sadly, her father died just 3 months after she was born. Her mother would end up remarrying 3 years later to a race car driver. Unfortunately, as awesome as he was, he let Phyllis's mother race as well, which was unheard of. Sadly, she died in a car crash. So,
well, most race drivers died in car crashes.
But, like, she's already got, like, an exciting life right there. But Phyllis ended up moving to England in 1941, so 20 years old, joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force as a flight mechanic, but she was quickly recruited to becoming a spy. She went through rigorous mental and physical training at that point, and she definitely had a mission, and it was pretty personal. She joined the SOE in revenge for her godmother's father having been shot by the Nazis, and then her godmother's suicide after being imprisoned. So she was like, she was on a mission. And she was commissioned as an honorary section officer. Again, she was like 20. On May 1st of 1944, she parachuted into Normandy to operate as part of the scientist circuit, and she using the code name Genevieve. She was Haley size and and fluent in French, so she was able to pose again as a teenage girl. Her story was that her family had moved to the region to escape the Allied bombing. She rode bicycles around the area, selling soap and chatting with German soldiers.
Well, at least we know what I can do if the world really goes to hell.
Right? We can put you on a bike. When she obtained any military intelligence, she encoded it for transmitting by knitting using one-time codes hidden on a piece of silk that she used to tie her hair up in, and she would translate them using Morse code equipment. When explaining how she concealed her codes, Phyllis said, "Well, I always carried my knitting because codes were on a piece of silk. I had about 2,000 codes I could use. When I used a code, I would just pinprick it to indicate that it had gone out. I wrapped the piece of silk around a knitting needle and put it in a flat shoelace, which I used to tie my hair up," which I have done on numerous occasions, and then forgot I had a knitting needle in my hair and almost stabbed myself in the neck when I was sleeping. But the coded messages took a half an hour for her to send to the Germans, and the Germans could identify where the signal came from within like an hour and a half. So she had to move constantly to avoid detection. At times, she stayed with Allied sympathizers, but often she had to sleep in forests and forage for her own food. During her months in Normandy...
She needs to get together with the Girl Guides.
Right? She might have been one. During her months in Normandy, Doyle sent 135 secret messages containing invaluable information on Nazi troop positions that was used to help Allied forces prepared for the Normandy landing on D-Day and during their subsequent military campaign. So, Doyle continued her mission until France's liberation in August of 1944. At one point, she was brought in for questioning, but the German authorities didn't think to examine her hair tie, so she was released.
Oh, I've heard about this. And I remember going... well, reading about it. Or maybe watching a doc. I can't remember. Anyway.
Yeah. So after World War II, she married an engineer with the surname Doyle. She would then go on to live in Kenya, Fiji, and Australia. She now lives in Auckland, New Zealand. She is still alive, and I want to hug her and high-five her.
But also colonialism.
Right. She did not discuss her wartime activities with her family until her children discovered them by reading about them on the internet in 2000. Like, how do you have
I love
that?
her.
They have that badass of a fucking life and then not.
Can we write her a letter? Let's write her a letter.
Let's do it. Seriously.
Let's send her a sticker.
Yes, I will totally freaking do it. I am dead serious. I will try to find her address. One other method that was common of use during the Second World War specifically, and there's like no badass one person to kind of link to it because there was a few people that did this, but the Belgian resistance movement recruited expert women knitters who lived near railway stations. The women watched for German troop and supply trains, and then they recorded their movements and the knitting patterns. And these innocent-looking knitting instructions could then be carried to their destination without fear of detection. Britain's Office of Censorship banned the sending of knitting patterns abroad in case they were used by German sympathizers to send coded messages to the enemy. So that is...
You would think that banning would have been a hint to
right, like a
Germans.
little red flag. That why are they banning that?
That's interesting.
What's up with that? So that is a quick jaunt down the knitting espionage, and 3 of my favorite badass ladies involved with it during wartime. And again, between the Girl Guides and all of the work and thousands of troops saved by these women, I then go, how the fuck is patriarchy a thing? Like, it makes 0 sense to me at this point.
I mean, I feel like if all of these women had just sat back and been like, weaker sex, man, sorry.
Oh, wow. Yeah, can you imagine?
No, that just makes me think of, like, the stories of John Adams' wife, when he was gone in God knows where, France, whatever. And she's, like, making the decisions to inoculate her kids against smallpox, and I think one of them dies, and, like, she's just there holding the fort, as it were. The patriarchy indeed. Always just, I don't understand.
I don't either.
No. I mean, we could, if we wanted to, as we are in the middle of a global pandemic, look at the places who are handling it the best and who's in charge.
Right. Seriously. Like,
just saying. Anyway. So, I really don't understand how it is that women aren't running the world. I guess because we don't tend to pull out guns and shoot each other when we're mad.
Right. That's true. That and, you know, society is so busy pinning us against each other that we, you know, forget to say fuck that and band together.
Oh, yeah. That is the most solid lesson I think that any lady type can learn. And it is, holy shit, be good to other women.
Seriously.
Yeah, help them. Let them help you. Be a team. Do this shit. Oh, I also forgot to add one thing, speaking of ladies banding together.
Yes.
About the Girl Guides. So, I was wondering if the Girl Guides, though they remain a girls-only organization to date, I was wondering if it was all girls or just cis girls.
That's a good question. I know Girl Scouts have opened it up. I mean, like, they are very intersectional, and they are very, if you identify as a female, then you're a Girl Scout. I mean,
well, today, though the Girl Guides remains a girls-only organization nominally, trans girls are girls and are allowed to become leaders in UK Girl Guides.
Awesome, as it should be.
As it should be, because trans girls are girls.
They are, absolutely.
But sometimes organizations like that fuck it up.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And, I mean, I'm sure they fucked it up for a good long while before they sorted it out, because that's how these things unfortunately work. But I thought that was important to mention, and I forgot to mention it during my Girl Guides bit. So, man, women.
Right?
Let's get shit done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this brings us to, I think, the weekly worst way to die.
Oh, shit. Let's see. I gotta think. Do you know what yours is?
I'm inclined to say anything related to the patriarchy is the worst way to go. But a specific thing would have to be just involving my knitting needles. Whether I forget ones in my hair and I accidentally stab myself in the throat because I'm that talented, or I call them the double-pointed needles of death. So,
not wrong.
Yeah, so accidentally just impaling myself with my own god darn knitting needles is probably my answer.
Alright, so I think mine has got to be having my head explode because I can't swim or raise my arms above my head.
That is a good one.
Because I think my head would explode.
Yeah, I get it. Oh, boy. So, hey, do you want to be spooky internet friends? You can find us at Bones and Bobbins on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find us at bonesandbobbins.com.
And don't forget to rate and review this podcast. It pleases the internet gremlins who can be fed after midnight. Just this once. And that's how we show up in recommendations, so that other morbid souls can find us.
So we can take all of the morbid souls and ban against the patriarchy. And on that note...
Obviously.
Yes. Let us leave you with some advice that you should never forget. No. Lock your doors.
And don't run with scissors. Or knitting needles, actually.
Yes. Yes, do not run with the needles.
No. Just saying.
Can we run? As long as we don't lift our arms up over our head, we're cool, right?
No, we actually aren't able to move swiftly at all.
Ugh.
No. No. Definitely can't run. Or bicycle. I'm really sorry to inform you that we cannot hurry at all. In any way.
We mustn't hurry.
No.
Fucking patriarchy.
Well, I guess that's pretty good since we're literally sitting in front of microphones.
Yes, because pandemic. All right.
And patriarchy.
Fucking patriarchy.
Anyway. And on that note, mwah, and goodbye.
Each episode of the Bones and Bobbins podcast is written and researched by Haley Pearson Cox and Natalie Hoyce. Our music was composed by Loyalty Freak Music. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bones and Bobbins. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, or check us out wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts so you won't miss a minute of our strange and creepy content.